And I sometimes joked, but I don't know if it was a joke. Like, I do think that Amazon did copy some of the things that we were doing, because we invented pickup points. We had 2,000 plus pickup point across Russia, because at the time in Russia it was all cash on delivery, and we had to figure out a way for people to get their goods and pay us at the same time. And then a couple of years later, Amazon launches their own pickup point. I was like, I'm sure Jeff was looking at us.
We have to ask him, is there a 6-page Amazon memo somewhere about your pickup points and whether to copy it? Sounds like there was. I want to start by taking us back about 12 years. You were in Russia as a CEO of a company that had just raised $100 million. And you are in a country that is famously hostile to outsiders, to women. You were a young woman at the time, even younger than you are now. And I want to understand how you ended up there.
That is a fantastic first question to start with. So yeah, at the time I was the CEO of a company called Ozon, which basically became the Amazon of Russia and went through an IPO. And Amazon did not exist in Russia. I ended up there because right before taking that job, I was working for the Boston Consulting Group. And I had just moved to Moscow because I was preparing to become a partner. And my very last project was for Ozon, which at the time was a small e-commerce company. But we had a really great relationship with one of their main shareholders. And so the shareholder asked us to do a project to help take Ozon to the next level. At the time, Ozon was probably one of maybe even a dozen e-commerce companies in Russia. And so I did that project, which was a very short project, probably 6 weeks. And I had this aha moment where I thought, oh, I can be an entrepreneur. I can work in an entrepreneurial company without having to go through the 0 to 1, because I had been an entrepreneur 3 times before. And every time I was like, oh my God, the 0 to 1 is so excruciating and it feels so lonely and you have to build so many things from scratch. And here I was joining that company or working for that company as a consultant who was doing a little less than $100 million of revenue, which for an e-commerce company is not that much. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. They figure out the 0 to 1. I wonder what it would be to work for such a company. And the CEO at the time approached me at the end of the project, and he was like, we're looking for a sales and marketing director. I think you'd be awesome. By the way, in about a year and a half, I'm going to leave Russia. I'm going to go back to Switzerland. He's Swiss. And I'm looking for my successor. And I want to be clear, there's 3 other candidates internally, so I'm not telling you here's the job. But if you're interested, that's something that you could try to get. And at the time, I was already missing being an entrepreneur, even though I was getting ready to become a partner at BCG. And there was this moment where I was like, sure, let's do it. That sounds crazy enough. What do I have to lose? And so I basically went back to the office and sat down with the senior partner at the time and was like, I think I'm going to quit. And I joined Ozon. I became the sales and marketing director, and then a year later, I was promoted to CEO. That's how it happened.
In that moment, I mean, you're sitting there minutes away from becoming a partner at BCG, which is a dream career trajectory for many people. Certainly a prestigious role, opportunity to get inside all sorts of companies and learn how they work. You're presented with an opportunity where there really are no guarantees. Had you been a sales and marketing person before that?
No, but I had been an entrepreneur. And when you're an entrepreneur, you wear every single hat on the planet. And I think you have, you develop this capacity to like make things happen. And so I was like, look, this CEO, which I admire, which I think is very, very smart and very thoughtful, strong IQ and EQ, thinks that I have a shot at it. So yeah, sure, let's go and do it. But for me, the most important feeling, it was not even rational. It was like I felt fear and excitement at the same time, and that in my life has always been the signal that there is something I should be doing.
Say more about that. What is? I mean, not everyone leans into fear. So what was that about for you?
Not just fear and excitement. It's the combination of the two. Because if I also, there are also times where I'm like fearful, and I'm like, okay, let's just step back and think about it. But this is, again, as a former entrepreneur, it was this moment where I was like, I am excited because I see something that could be really big. And I was looking at Ozon, and I thought that this company had a real shot at becoming the largest e-commerce company in Russia, and had all the basic infrastructure that leveraged properly would help them get there. And at the same time, there was a little bit of fear because I was like, it looks really hard. It looks really complex. What if? And again, this is when I feel that combination of like, there is something big and maybe I'm not going to get it, that I don't know, maybe my inner competitive double is like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Let's just prove to the world that this can happen.
Was there any fear about doing this in Russia?
No.
Why not?
Because I think Russia at the time was a very different environment than what it is right now. Because I'm a relentless optimist. I believe that there is always a way to make things work. And also because I had, thanks to my grandfather, I had a very strong compass in terms of what I'm okay to do and not okay to do. And so when the board of Ozon talked to me about joining them as sales and marketing director, and we had a very open conversation about maybe you'll be the next CEO. I had a very direct conversation with them about, just to be clear, this business has to be squeaky clean. There's no other option. Otherwise, I'm not joining. And Ozon had Russian shareholders, but it also had Western shareholders. Index Ventures was a big shareholder. Intel Capital was a shareholder. They were both sitting on the board. And so I had conversations with them. And that combined with the fact that the CEO was someone I implicitly trusted and whose values resonated very much with me, and who had been hired in particular to help make sure that Ozon was a squeaky clean business. All of that combined helped me feel like that was okay.
I want to pull on the thread of your grandfather.
Sure.
What's the story there? What did he give you that put you in that position to walk into that room and know what you needed to say and do?
My grandfather was an amazing, amazing human being. He was like what you would consider in France to be like the poorest of the poor. He was born in the south of France as what we call a no-land farmer. So someone who basically had only his two arms to work, without a father. And he basically, from the age of 12, started working to support his mother and his siblings. And then World War II happened, and my grandfather went into the resistance. And he lost part of his right hand, which when you're right-handed is a problem, when he was not even 18. And he went on working 3 jobs to sustain a family. And my grandfather was the person that I would probably look up to the most as I was growing up, because he had this incredible set of values that really resonated with me and that I carry to this day, because I see a lot of the decision making that I follow use this set of values that my grandfather like drilled into my brain for years. We would go on early bike ride at like 5 a.m. in the morning, and then he would talk to me about all the things that matter in life. And so, for example, he would be like, nothing worth doing is ever easy. Like you can't complain, you can't whine. If it's hard, it probably means you're having an impact. guess what? When I worked at Ozon, or when I worked at Compass, or even when I work at BCG, or when I work with founders now at Techstars, I'm like, yeah, I know it's painful, but you want to have an impact, and nothing worth doing is ever easy. My grandfather used to say, thank you is the most important word. So merci in French is the most important word. And that feeling of gratitude is something that has stayed with me to this day. And for him, this thank you was more than, saying thank you because someone holds the door for you. It was more like, thank you for the opportunity that I have to be alive. Thank you for the fact that I have amazing grandchildren. Thank you for the fact that there was fresh bread today. And so I feel like that gratitude, that way of looking at the world in a half full glass type of way, is so important to me as an entrepreneur. And so I value that a lot. And then I could keep going, but
I want to hear the other values. I mean, it's fascinating that your grandfather understood instinctively sounds like at a cellular level, what now neuroscientists tell us, that gratitude actually rewires the brain, and having an active gratitude practice matters deeply in the day. So yeah, I'm super curious. What are the other values that he imparted?
He talked about why, saying you should always ask why. And interestingly enough, when I joined BCG several years later, BCG has this principle that says you should always ask why 5 times, because if you ask why 5 times, you're going to get to the bottom of whatever it is that you're looking for. And so, yeah, I remember my grandfather saying, you need to understand why someone is asking you to do something, or why you're doing something. And so that to me has been very, very important. Work ethic. I mean, when I was talking to him about why he decided when he was 16 to go into the resistance, because I mean, we all know not all French people made that decision. He was like, you got to fight for what you believe in. And I kept pushing, but like, why? And his only answer is, you got to fight for what you believe in. And I remember having this conversation with him several years later when I was a lot more mature and talking to him about some challenges I was having in the business environment, and a tough decision that I had to make. And it was like, you got to fight for what you believe in, which means that if the right decision is option A versus option B, even if there's a cost for option A, go with option A. And going back to your question about Russia, that to me was very important, because I was absolutely clear that I would not be running a business if I had to pay bribes. That was a non-starter. And I would fight for what I believed in, and that included running a really, really clean business.
So I want to come back, but I want to spend another minute on this, because it feels like almost every conversation I have with a business leader today, there is a quite deep struggle about what's happening in the world and how to talk about it, and when to take a position and how to take a position. Almost no one has even a framework for how to do it. And yet we know, for example, that aside from what's right, businesses do better in democracies than they do in autocracies. This is a global problem, not specific to the US. So when you think about the wisdom your grandfather imparted and what you've learned in your career, what are you telling CEOs, and what are you doing when you're faced with decisions about when to speak up or when to take a position on something happening in the world?
Very interesting that you're asking that question, because I literally had that conversation 2 weeks ago with one of our portfolio company. I mean, we have 4,000 of them, so like we do have a lot
at Techstars.
At Techstars,
yeah.
Yes. And so we have a lot of this conversation, and that was exactly that. Like, he was wondering whether or not he should take a position on something that had happened in the states he operates in. And the conversation I usually have with founders is around, okay, first of all, what are your values? Not the values of the company, though when you're the founder, usually the value of the company and your value do tend to overlap almost like a perfect Venn diagram. But like, what are the things, where do you draw the line? Like, what are the things that you're okay to do and not okay to do? And it's it's really interesting to see that most people actually have never done the exercise of actually writing what are the values that they follow in their life, what are the lines that they are not ready to cross, and also what are the things that they are very comfortable with, even though maybe the rest of the world is not. And so my conversation with our portfolio companies around this topic always starts with, tell me what are your values? And like write them down for
your
me.
Personal values.
Your personal values. Then the next conversation or the follow-on to this question is, tell me what are the values of the company? Usually, again, if it's a founder, they tend to overlap, but not completely. And then I help them think about the decision they have to make through that lens. So there are events in the world where your company in one way or another is going to be impacted, is going to be linked to. And in that case, you should use this value as a framework about what you want and don't want to say. But if it's a topic that has nothing to do with your business, I generally advise the CEO to not talk about it, which doesn't mean that they're not allowed to have their own opinion, but I try to have them separate the two.
Because if they do talk about it, it is assumed they're also speaking on behalf of the company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a sometimes very uncomfortable position. And a lot of CEOs, especially young CEOs, like this is their first business. They haven't really operated in mature businesses. They don't fully understand that they are basically the company and the company is them. And so whatever they say, whatever they do, it's basically is a reflection of the company.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that, and I think it is sober advice. And also, what was your grandfather's name?
Pierre.
I won't say it as beautifully as you did. But your grandfather joined the resistance at a time, to your point, when many French didn't, when it was risky to do so. And it sounds like he didn't come from much, and yet he was risking his livelihood. He worked with his hands and lost. So at what point does a business leader have an obligation to speak up because they have at least some power to force change, and it's worth the risk to the company to do so?
I think it's a very personal choice. I think we often try to put framework around everything and be like, if X happened, then Z should be the consequences. And the reality is it's unfortunately more art than it is science, which is why when I talk to one of our portfolio companies, I go through that exercise of talk to me about your value, what are the things that matter to you, and then talk to me about your company and what are the values that resonate with your employees. And then let's think about, is this a topic that you really feel, first of all, do you even have an opinion? Because it's interesting to see how many founders, they are so deep into their business that they barely have the time to look at the world around them, and let alone have an opinion about it, which, by the way, can be a challenge. So do you have an opinion? Do you feel strongly about it? Do you feel that there is your value compel you to say something about it? Or are you just reacting because you're getting a lot of pressure? And we all know that happens. Like sometimes you got your employees, you got your shareholders, you got the media, you got social media asking you to take a position. And I think being a strong leader is also to know when to shut up and not say anything, because you're not supposed to have an opinion on everything. And certainly you're not supposed to have an opinion on everything publicly. Yeah, no. And if you speak out on one thing, then next thing you know, your customers, your team members, et cetera, may be insisting you speak out on everything. And where do you draw the line? Exactly. It's complicated. But again, if at the personal level, like you feel compelled to talk about it, just get a few advices. Like I think no one succeeds alone ever. And that's particularly true when you have a PR challenge to deal with. Like you should spend time talking to people around you about like, hey, if I say that, what do you think is going to be the reaction? Not so much to sugarcoat your message, but more to make sure that your message has the impact that you want it to have. And then if you feel strongly about it, go for it. Could you be a CEO in Russia today? No. Why not? I worked in Russia at a time where the country was very open to the outside world. I was there from 2009 to 2014, 15, until the first war in Ukraine, which changed everything.
Inside Russia?
Inside Russia. So I was there at a time where foreign investors were coming and investing. Again, like Ozon had Index Venture and Intel Capital on its cap table. You could feel the desire for the country to modernize. There was a lot happening in terms of infrastructure building. Part of the success of Ozon, by the way, came from the fact that we built the first nationwide private delivery infrastructure. And so we were able to deliver books and toys and mobile phone to places where within less than a week, especially if you were to go all the way to Vladivostok, in a place where sometimes delivery was not even possible, or it would take like a month, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months. And so there was just it was a very interesting time to be there. It was very cosmopolitan. There was a lot of big hope and big vision. A lot of opening to the West, and so it was a great time to be there. I have not been back there since I left. Based on everything I'm seeing, unfortunately, this has changed quite a bit.
Why did the attack on Ukraine in the mid-2010s change things inside Russia?
Look, I'm not a geopolitical expert. I would just say that it was palpable in the air that there was a change of attitude towards the West, and the West was having a change of attitude towards Russia. And this is the time where the first sanctions happened. And a lot of business people on both sides started thinking about whether what had happened, what had transpired in the past in terms of relaxing the commercial relationship and being able to invest and being able to travel and whether that was going to continue. And so I think that changed a lot of things.
And is that why you left?
Yes.
What,
moral values, always.
Was it hard to leave?
A little bit.
What was hard about it?
It felt that there were so much more that could have been done. And so it was just a little sad because I wanted to do even more, but well,
you built so much, and if there was so much more to do, how incredibly difficult to then walk away.
Yeah, a little bit. As my grandfather was saying, nothing worth doing is ever easy. So
you had this quite remarkable run there, building the Amazon of Russia. The press hailing you as the Jeff Bezos of Russia. It wasn't your first act, but it was maybe your first big act. Is that fair to say?
That was the first public one.
First public act.
That was the first time where I encountered the media, where like what I was doing or saying would actually make it to the big newspaper. When we closed, you mentioned the $100 million round at the time, and it's going to sound silly, but at the time that was the largest fundraising round ever done in Europe, which, if you think about it now, people barely talks about $100 million round. It's like it's a rounding error. At the time, that was a huge deal. That was the first time that I encountered venture capital. I was lucky enough because one of the very first meeting I had in the U.S. with a venture capitalist was with Michael Moritz from Sequoia. Talk about setting the bar really high. And it was phenomenal. I was like, oh my God, so there are people whose job is to invest in entrepreneurs. That sounds awesome. And then, they're actually really smart. I had a very, very good conversation with Michael Moritz about the future of Russia and how Sequoia was thinking about it from a geopolitical perspective. And then we had a conversation about the future of e-commerce and in particular, what was so specific about Ozon, but in hindsight also Amazon and Whole Food and a lot of successful e-commerce company or retail company, which was the real estate component and the delivery component. For Ozon, the key differentiator was that we were able to build that global nationwide delivery system. And I sometimes joked, but I don't know if it was a joke. Like, I do think that Amazon did copy some of the things that we were doing, because we invented pickup points. We had 2,000 plus pickup point across Russia, because at the time in Russia, it was all cash on delivery. And we had to figure out a way for people to get their goods and pay us at the same time. And so we created these pickup points, and then a couple of years later, Amazon launches their own pickup point. I was like, I'm sure Jeff was looking at us.
We have to ask him, is there a 6-page Amazon memo somewhere about your pickup points and whether to copy it? It sounds like there was.
So Michael was having that conversation with me. And like, there are so many first at that time, whether it's, as I say, media or VC.
So when you left, I imagine you had any number of opportunities. And how did you decide what to go do next?
I wanted to see a very big company, and I wanted to see a public company.
Why?
Because I believed that at some point in my career, I would be taking a company, whether it would be my company from the ground up or a company that I would be hired to manage, to that unprecedented scale. And I wanted to experience it from the inside. And so I talked to a few companies, and I was approached by the Priceline Group, which is now called Booking Holding, which owns Booking.com, Priceline.com, obviously, thanks to William Shatner. Everybody knows Priceline. OpenTable, Kayak, rental cars, Agoda, and I can't remember a few others. At the time, they were already, I think, a $70 billion market cap company. And I was approached to basically run the operations of the group. And it sounded like a super interesting experience. I had a ton of respect for the chairman of the board, Jeff Boyd. I've never seen someone run a public company board as efficiently as Jeff. Like, it was sitting in the boardroom and just watching Jeff managing the board was like an unbelievable experience.
What does he do that makes it so unbelievable? Besides
being very smart, but he had this uncanny ability to have this great relationship with the CEO, obviously, but also with every board member, while at the same time being very directive in the way the board was supposed to function. And he seems to intuitively always understand that balance of being friendly and being demanding, being open and being directive, encouraging people to participate into an open debate, and yet close the debate when, okay, that's fine. We've been around the block a few times. We're good. Let's move on. And so I think this incredible EQ around how to manage the dynamic of a board to make it really effective. It is really, really hard to have a board which is effective in times of peace, but also in times of war. And I saw Jeff Boyd do that regularly and seamlessly, and like, he to this day remains like the benchmark for me in terms of what a outstanding chairman looks like.
It's a huge job and an opportunity to learn from some of the best. And also, you had only been an entrepreneur and a consultant and an intrapreneur in many ways, right? It feels like a very big shift to go into run operations for a company that big.
Yes.
How was that?
It was very exciting. I like that suddenly everything had 2 more 0. Like, you would go into the room and they would be talking about Booking.com Google advertising budget, and suddenly we were talking about a few $1 billion of budget. I was like, what? Like what are you talking about? And at the time, Booking was the largest advertiser with Google, period. It was so important. That relationship was so important that there is a certain number of things that the Google ad team built. They built it based on Booking.com feedback. So that's how important that relationship was to both companies. We were working on a translation platform. At the time, AI was not as popular as it is right now. And all the companies of, at the time, Priceline Group, now Booking Holdings, were international companies. So for every single one of them, they needed to tackle the problem of how do you translate content accurately, which seems obvious, apart from the fact that when you do it with that amount of content at that type of scale across multiple brands, like this is a very different challenge than anything that I had seen before. And part of the work that I did at the holding level for the operation was to figure out a translation platform that would work across the group to translate all of that. Like it was just a completely different scale. And so I had seen the 0 to 1 because I had built 3 business of my own. I had seen you went to 1, now let's take it to 100, which was Ozon. When I joined, we had a little less than $100 million of revenue. When I left, we had a little over $1 billion. And now I was seeing like what it would look like when you were generating billions of dollars of cash and having a 70, 80, I think now they are $100 billion market cap.
And for a lot of entrepreneurs, that transition would be intellectually really exciting and emotionally and spiritually maybe really difficult because you go from, to your point, when you're an entrepreneur, you're wearing every hat. You're doing everything. If the trash needs taking out, you're taking out the trash, right? You're in Russia. You've got to figure out delivery to Vladivostok. Okay, and you drill in on that. You've got a team, and Tiger team probably working on that. You beta test something, and that didn't work. So I'm going to try this other thing, and you get there. When you're operating at that scale, where you've got billions being spent on Google in a year, right? You can't operate in that. Most companies, at least. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you found a way. How was that for you, operating at that scale and not being able necessarily to move the same kind of alacrity that you had to move in your prior jobs? That's
what I liked so much about Priceline Group / Booking Holdings, which was they were big and yet they had kept this entrepreneurial spirit. One of the things that was very, very special within the Priceline Group was that most of the brand were still being run by the founder / the original team. So Steve Hafner was still at Kayak, and he was still going around and making his interesting jokes on stage but also running the business from the inside. And at Agoda, you had also the founder was there, and at Booking, the original founder wasn't there, but the CEO was part of the original team, and the group had figured out a way to create commonality and a camaraderie spirit, and yet keep them independent. So the founder would still feel like that was their business and they were still running it. And so in hindsight, I think the reason why I enjoyed my time there so much was because it wasn't like a big, heavy, bureaucratic corporation. It was still a company made of entrepreneurs who were figuring out new stuff every day on big thing and small things. And so it felt very, very entrepreneurial.
Almost every big company that does acquisitions at that scale screws them up. I mean, right? Yeah. This is an outlier. What Priceline / Booking was able to do.
Yes.
What was the secret to the success there? Because we talk all the time, and every entrepreneur has heard this. You're going to be able to continue operating as you had. We're going to give you and then it just doesn't happen because you have to fit into a bureaucracy. You have to do 37 turns of a budget deck because there's some CFO insisting that they see another version of the 6-year plan that is made up anyway. So what was special?
Sounds very personal when you're talking.
Yes, I've got my own PTSD about the 37 turns of a budget deck and 5-year plans in a world where you don't know what's happening in 2 years. But seriously, what was special about Booking / Priceline that allowed for that?
So first, I think they were very good at identifying the right company, and I think a lot of the credit goes to Glenn Fogel, who is now the CEO of the group, and at the time was in charge of all their M&A. I think Glenn still is an incredibly smart deal maker. So I think it started with that, like identifying company that makes sense, both as standalone and as value added to the rest of the group. And this is non-trivial, and Glenn was exceptionally good at that. I think the second part was finding this balance between what we called smart connections and independence. And when the CEO and I, that was literally my mandate. It was to figure out how all of that would work together. We coined that term smart connection, which was, we don't want to use the word synergy, because synergy always feels like you're trying to, first of all, it sounds too much like a consultant. And then second, it sounds like you're going to do stuff that you shouldn't be doing in the name of synergies. If you say smart connections, what you're trying to do is to create value added. So like, if this connection actually creates something better, let's do it. Otherwise, let's not do it. And that leads to the last thing that we were constantly saying, which is we will not sacrifice the entrepreneurial spirit in the name of synergy. So we are going, another way of saying that is, we are going to tolerate inefficiency in the name of supporting entrepreneurship. And that, I think, is the secret sauce. This is what made us countless times say, yeah, that would be great. Like the market would probably reward us for creating that synergy. But if we do that, we are going to significantly impact the entrepreneurial spirit in these different companies. And so we're not going to do that, because ultimately we want entrepreneurs. And so we'd rather accept a little more inefficiency in the name of entrepreneurship.
If you're talking to a founder today who has an exciting opportunity to exit the company, sell to a bigger company, but they're worried about this question of forced synergy, not tolerating the smart inefficiencies, how are you advising them? What should they be looking for that you learned from your time at Booking?
I would start by telling them it's such a luxury to be in that position. Just to be clear, most entrepreneurs will never even have that opportunity. And so back to relentless optimism and thank the world for everything that happens to you. Like, if you're in a position where you're being offered a lot of money to sell your company, and your one worry is, am I going to be able to accept all the synergies that are going to be most likely imposed upon me? This is a happy place to be.
This is a high-class problem, yes.
Now, if you are in that happy place, I think it depends on what the founder wants. So first of all, very openly, there's a lot of founders who are considering that option because they're tired. Like, they want to do something else. They're excited about another idea. A lot of founders go on and build another business afterwards. A lot of founders, they love the 0 to 1. They don't really love what comes after. And so for a lot of, when that's the case, the conversation just then becomes, okay, how long do you want to stay in that company? And if it's, based on your earnout, because there usually is an earnout, if it's a couple of years, you can probably tolerate most of it.
Yeah.
So that's okay. For the ones who are saying, no, that's my baby, like when you start talking in these terms, when you can see the emotional attachment, I always encourage them to have a very, very direct conversation with the potential buyers, understanding that promises are cheap. And that most likely, especially if you're being acquired by a public company, at some point the CFO is going to come in and basically brute force.
So let's flip it around then. Why aren't more leadership teams at big companies who are doing the acquiring looking at the Priceline Booking model and saying, that works, we should be doing a version of that? What is it that stops them from doing the thing that there's evidence that shows that it actually works?
Because they're often subjected to very different constraints, especially if they're if they're public. So the Priceline / Booking was in this very favorable position where the company was, as a whole, was growing. The company as a whole was very profitable, and the company as a whole was hitting the market expectation or going beyond the market expectation quarter after quarter after quarter. And so when you are able to deliver that, then you got a lot more leeway from the market. And so now you can start being like, sure, this brand of ours is going to lose a little bit of money, or yeah, we're going to invest a little more. That's not super efficient to have 5 different translation centers, but who cares? Like, it's not that urgent or not that important, and the street doesn't care that much. most entrepreneurs are going to sell their business into a company that is not in such a comfortable position. And when that happens, the street puts a lot of pressure on you to, increase your margin and cut your costs. So that's usually the first explanation. I think the second explanation is it's probably more of a less rational and more emotional. I've seen countless time big company buying a small company and not using these words, but basically having that attitude of like, I own you. Like, you're mine. And so when that happened, and again, these words are not really pronounced.
You can feel it.
But you can feel it, like, you're mine now. And when that happened, like, inevitably, things are shifting step by step. It's like, oh, you decided to spend how much? On what? Why? I would never have done it like that. And it's one thing when, you're just looking at it from the outside, but when you own that business and they just announce to you that they're going to spend a few $1 million on something that you personally believe is completely silly, it becomes really, really hard to be like, let me look the other way and let them go. And I think the strengths of what the Priceline Group Booking Holding were doing at the time, and as far as I can tell are still doing, was it's okay. Like, yeah, I would have done it differently, but I trust the founder and the street is not putting a lot of pressure on me. So that's fine.
I want to jump us ahead to what you're doing today. Any number of companies in any number of industries, given your experience and expertise and relationships, would want you as their CEO. You chose to go run Techstars. Why?
Because it's an amazing business for multiple reasons. Just to be clear, when they called me, I was like, I don't know. I'm not even really sure who you are, you guys. And I don't know if I want to be an investor, because you're an investment company, right? Oh, you're not sure? Oh, okay. Sure. And then what happened is the headhunter, very, very smart headhunter, was like, why don't you just talk to the founder? Like, you don't have to take the job or even interview for the job. Just talk to him. And I had a great conversation, but it wasn't like, oh my God, love at first sight, that's the company I have to go to. It was more like, David is really smart. Okay, maybe I should think about it more. And then I got a second conversation. And I was still like, I don't know. But I like working with entrepreneurs. When I was building my companies, I come from a family where the word entrepreneur was not known. Like, we never used the word entrepreneur at the dinner table. No one explained to me that venture capital exists. No one walked me through a P&L and a balance sheet. Like, that was not that. My mother was a history teacher, and my father was an engineer, but not like the sexy Silicon Valley kind. And so it was lonely. Like, it was a lot of work with people who didn't necessarily understood what I was trying to do. And I didn't have the connection. Like, I didn't know how to raise money. I didn't know where to find my customers. And when I finally understood what Techstars was providing to entrepreneurs, because I did my homework after 2 calls with the founder, I was like, I wish I had that when I was an entrepreneur. Like, I wish I had people who deeply cared about my business and had this unbelievable network and would be a safe space for me to talk about all the crazy stuff that I have to deal with. Because let's face it, being an entrepreneur is basically a marathon full of crazy stuff happening one after the other. And then the second thing was when I started dreaming about what the company could be. Like, that's how you get me. It's like when I start thinking about like what it could be if.
I've been a Techstars mentor, so I'm familiar, but maybe not everyone who's listening or watching is familiar. What was Techstars at the time, and what did you see the potential for what it could be?
Techstars was at the time what I would call a ecosystem development focused accelerator, meaning we were very focused on developing local communities. It was a lot of, or one of our biggest KPI was NPS of founders.
Net Promoter Score.
Net Promoter Score.
And at the time, Techstars was in a number of markets around the country, maybe around the world at the time.
Yes, a little bit around the world. Still pretty limited, but a little bit, yeah.
Early stage companies would apply to become part of it. Techstars would take an equity stake and put them through almost a boot camp and get them to a pitch day where they're able to talk about their businesses and hopefully raise a round.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
But the company didn't really think of itself as an investment business, which was very interesting. We're talking about shifting even the internal mindset of what we're doing. I remember starting first day, and my first 100 day, I had what I called a listening tour. So we had at the time 280 employees, and I talked to every single employee one-on-one with the same set of questions, including one which was, what is Techstars? What is our business? And not one told me Techstars is an investment business. And I heard everything. I heard the easiest one is, we're an accelerator. Then I heard we're a marketplace. I heard we're a SaaS business. That one I'm still trying to figure out. What do you mean by we're a SaaS business? I heard everything apart from we're an investment business. And I remember going back to some of the senior leader and be like, so we raise money and we deploy money into early stage startup. Like, we're basically a pre-seed investor, right? It's like, yeah, but that's not how we see ourselves. And so the biggest change internally, and that informed a lot of the strategy decision that we took after I joined, was to look at ourselves as an investment business who is there to help founders be successful. And what it means, not happy, successful, which is very different. NPS measure to a large extent happiness. Return measure success. And so it was to say the founder is still absolutely critical. Like we live and die for the founder. We take common shares in the company. Like, we are with you in the trenches no matter what. But what we're optimizing for is for you as a founder to be the most successful that you can be. And that was a big shift.
And you saw the opportunity to reframe the mission and the vision of Techstars before you came in.
Yes. I think that was the first thing. And then the second thing that got me really excited is what it could be.
Which was?
In the future. The best and largest tech investor in the world. Not just pre-seed. Everywhere.
How's it going?
It's going well. I mean, it takes time. This is a business that operates on a 3-year cycle because you raise your fund every 3 years. So it takes time to get there, which is very different than an e-commerce business where you basically operate every 2 weeks. You just try something new. I love the impact that we're having with entrepreneurs.
When you think about your time at Booking/Priceline, what have you taken from that experience that you've successfully deployed at Techstars?
What I've found the most useful was from my experience at Compass. Because Compass is by now the largest residential real estate company in the United States. They're a public company. And they had to figure out this interesting hybrid model where you both a tech company because Compass invested in a lot of technology to support real estate agents. The customer of Compass is not the buyer or the seller; it's the real estate agent. And at the time, the real estate agents were not really getting real support, technological support from the brokers. And Compass changed that. And yet at the same time, it's a very physical business. It's a business where ultimately you have to show people houses and apartments and a lot. It's a people first business. It's a lot on the relationship. And so finding this balance between, hey, we want to be big, we want to have a platform, we want to leverage data, we want to be a tech company, and yet we also are a people first business. And when I left, when I joined, we had a little less than 1,000 agents. And when I left, I think we had like 14,000 agents. Compass was so focused on serving the agents. It was such a change, a cultural change for real estate agents. Robert Reffkin, the founder of Compass, was very adamant about this business is for real estate agents. Everything I do is to help them be better and make more money. And they are my customer. And I saw Robert making dozens of phone calls every day to the agents in the network to wish them a happy birthday, a happy anniversary. Hey, I heard one of your kids is sick. Is everything okay? And so that personal relationship was absolutely critical to the business. And a lot of agents just came for Robert.
At Techstars, once they're in Techstars, you own equity. I mean, it's great if they're saying nice things about you, but to your point, you're really being judged now on the return, right?
Yes, but not only.
Okay.
And this is why the Compass experience, which itself came from the Ozon experience where I had to run an e-commerce business, but also like 2,000 physical pickup point. And so that hybrid approach was always really critical for the business I was working for. But it's not so much the scale that matters, is we need to be there for these founders. Like the reason why they come to us, it's not for the check. Like they can raise money somewhere else. They came for everything that comes with it, which is the accelerator program, like the boot camp, which is 13 weeks. And at Techstars, it's extremely hands-on. It's like we're, as I said earlier, like we are with you in the trenches. And we know the name of your dog, and we know if you're getting through a divorce or if you're having a new girlfriend, and we know everything. Like because we care and because we're with you all the time. And so the challenge for us was and continue to be, how do you create the best return and have strong relationship with the founders, because that's how you can help them in the best way possible and get the return that they want and our LPs want. And so that's finding that sweet spot all the time.
Entrepreneurs are under enormous pressure. I mean, every day, right? They have most of it self-imposed, but they have, one or more team members whose livelihood they're responsible for. They have investors whose capital they're responsible for. They have, new-ish at the minimum customers who are relying on them to deliver a product or service or whatever it might be. I'm not trying to get into the politics of what's happening in the Middle East right now. The added layer of doing this in a literal war zone is unimaginably intense. So how do you support entrepreneurs who are working under such extreme duress?
I don't think there is a perfect answer to that question, to be honest with you. I think at the time when the October event happened, we reached out. We were just about to start the program in Tel Aviv, and we reached out to our managing director and the team who were physically based in Tel Aviv. And we reached out to the 12 founders who were about to start the class. Some of them were literally on the plane or about to board the plane. And we asked them, what do you want? Like, what is the best way for us to support you? Not in the, again, it's not a political statement. It's like our job is to make you as an entrepreneur successful. Like, how do we do that? And the consensus was, they wanted to continue ahead with the program. That was very important. Some of these founders had put everything on the line to be part of the program, to get investment from Techstars. And at the same time, everybody understood that was probably not the best time to do it, like right this second. So we postponed by a few weeks, just frankly to understand what was going to happen, make sure that our employees, and also we had a lot of portfolio companies there. And then we decided to do part of the program in London, based on their feedback, and part of the program remote. And we discussed heavily how could we provide mental health support and additional support, basically, because anyone who goes through a war has a very extraordinary situation to deal with. And to your point, on top of having to deal with the extraordinary circumstances that being an entrepreneur puts you through on a daily basis.
I'm struck by the experiences you had in Russia and almost the sliding doors of what could have been if Russia had stayed open to the West, if the attitudes had changed, if your first $100 million investment for Europe had become the first $1 billion investment. How much of the Russia experience informs how you're approaching the rest of the world?
the way I look at the world is mostly through the lens of there are extraordinary talent everywhere. And I saw it in Russia at a time where a lot of people didn't really see Russia as a place to do business, even though it was very open to the West, much more than it is right now. We didn't talk about that, but I lived in India for some time. I lived in South Africa for some time. I lived in Ukraine for some time. So I lived in China, actually. I forgot that one. And so I lived in a lot of places. And every time what struck me was the amount of talent, the amount of willpower, the amount of unstoppable founders that you could see everywhere, and how many of them just didn't have the right support network, the right environment to be successful. And so at Techstars, what we always say is talent and ideas are distributed evenly, but opportunities are not. And part of what we're trying to do is to bridge that gap. Not because it's the right thing to do, though it is absolutely the right thing to do, but because it's a good investment case. Like the best investors are the one who go and invest in things that everybody else is misunderstanding. And so for us at Techstars, it's a lot about like, hey, there's this entire group of founders who are completely overlooked by pretty much everyone else. We think that there is an opportunity there. So it's not so much Russia. It's more the fact that I've had this international exposure that tells me that everybody is interesting and everybody deserves to be listened to at least for 15 minutes, and then you see.
What is Techstars 3 years from now if you're successful in what you're doing?
I think we are, for entrepreneurs, the place where they want to go because they see that this is going to fundamentally change their trajectory and their probability of being successful. Because let's be clear, the majority of entrepreneurs actually will fail. And that's part of, by the way, when I interview a founder, when we go through the selection process, one of my favorite questions is, tell me, how long do you think that it's going to take you to make that business successful? And founders were like, 3 to 5 years. I'm like, oh my God, you have no idea. And it's usually like, it's what I'm looking for are founders who have the 10, 15 years horizon, because most successful company, it takes them that long to be successful. And so what I'm hoping for is even more entrepreneurs globally knowing Techstars, really recognizing us as a partner, as an investor worth having on your cap table, because we're not going to just give you a check. We're going to be with you to help you through whatever it is that you have to go through. And God knows that as you build your business, there's so many things so many black swan are going to fly right in your face. And having someone by your side who helps you deal with that is really important. And so that's mostly what I'm hoping for.
If we were to create an AI clone of your grandfather, Pierre, and invite him into this conversation, what do you think he would say to you about what you're doing today?
He will remind me that nothing worth doing is ever easy. I think that's the one thing that he kept telling me over and over and over again. And I think coming from him, it had a lot of weight, because I was seeing him, working several jobs and being always on the road and raising 3 children and all of that, doing it with a serious handicap, and still be happy and joyful and being like, yeah, it's hard, but nothing worth doing is ever easy. So I think he would likely remind me that right away. And then he would ask me, how are you doing? But like the first thing is, remember, nothing worth doing is ever easy. I
think he'd tell you he's proud of you too.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
It's a lovely place to wrap. Thank you so much.
Thank you.